Hello and welcome to today's edition of Grammar Tuesday with me, Mr. Bruff. Everything you see in today's video comes from Mr. Bruff's Guide to Grammar, which you can pick up on Amazon or mrbruff.com. You'll notice the software I'm using to give this presentation is different to the software I normally use, and that's because I'm on holiday and the MacBook I have with me does not have PowerPoint. But just because I'm on holiday, I didn't want to let down all those people who wake up every Tuesday thinking, where's my dose of grammar from Mr. Bruff? So I'm using Prezi. Anyway, I'm going to start with hyphens, which are probably the easiest of hyphens and dashes. It's funny, you know, when you're doing a piece of writing, if you actually stop at the end and count how many types of punctuation you've used, it's probably only going to be 3 or 4. And yet you really want to be using 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 different types of punctuation. Certainly 8 is the aspirational target for those students who want to achieve the highest grades in any piece of work that's assessed on writing. So hyphens and dashes are quite simple little additions to add to your sort of arsenal of punctuation use that will help you increase that number. So hyphens then, let's start with those. You can use hyphens to create a compound word. So if you have a look at this sentence, 20 odd teachers are not the same as 20 odd teachers. Now what you'll see here is that this hyphenated word 20 odd, which means, you know, around 20, is different to the two words 20 odd, which mean 20 strange. Now this is the hyphen here, and you'll see it's 20 space hyphen space odd. So that's how we use the hyphen for compound words, but they also turn other words into one word. So numbers such as 21, 22, 23, and also some prefixes or prefixes, depending on how you like to say that word. That's my ex-girlfriend, the prefix ex. Then we have a hyphen and then girlfriend. So that's the use of hyphens. Also though, when you're handwriting a piece of work, you'll use hyphens. When you get to the end of the line and you haven't actually finished the word that you're writing, you pop a little hyphen in, and that sort of makes the examiner or the teacher realize I'm carrying on this word on the next line. So fairly simple for hyphens. Dashes then. Now dashes are longer than hyphens, and you don't need a space on either side of a dash. So I'll show you an example. They are an informal and quite dramatic punctuation mark. You can see here the hyphens are longer than the dashes. Sorry, the dashes are longer than the hyphens, and there's no space. So what do they do? Well, what they do is quite simple. They're like brackets, okay? So you could have and quite dramatic in brackets here, or you could have bracketing commas to make the complex sentence. But unlike brackets or bracketing commas, what the dash does is it emphasizes the bit in the middle. So if you're trying to say they're an informal and quite dramatic punctuation mark, then it's this emphasis on and quite dramatic. If you're really trying to emphasize the point that they're quite dramatic, then you can put it in dashes because it emphasizes that point. So that's where they're different to, you know, other punctuation choices. There are other uses of dashes, of course. You can use them in an informal way, and it's really debatable whether you'd want to do this in a piece of examination writing, but you can use it to sort of suggest broken off thought. I really like that song. Was that someone at the door? This kind of, I've been interrupted in what I was thinking about. You can use them in sort of writing to argue, and kind of if you're getting really passionate about your sort of thoughts when you're writing a persuasive piece, but mostly it is a sort of informal style of writing. There are two types of dashes, the N dash and the M dash. The N dash is so called because it's the width of the letter N, and it's one hyphen long, and you use it when you're talking about ranges. For example, you know, date ranges 1850 to 1885. The M dash, which is the one you use for all of the other uses that I've gone through in this video of the dash, is slightly longer, thought of as the length of the letter M, and that is, as I say, used in all the other occasions. So how do writers use dashes? Well, We know that Jane Austen, in her writing of Pride and Prejudice, uses a lot of dashes. Actually, used a lot more dashes than are in the published versions today. I'll explain that in a second. But this whole book, if you've ever read it, is just all funny and ironic and very elegant in the style of writing. Um, and she uses dashes, Jane Austen uses dashes, for example, when she's explaining, uh, writing a little bit about Mrs. Bennet, who's really excited and almost delirious. The use of M dashes sort of highlights that. Jane's is nothing to it, nothing at all. I am so pleased, so happy, such a charming man, so handsome, so tall. Oh, my dear Lizzie. If you've watched the BBC adaptation of the Pride and Prejudice, you could imagine the character, um, you know, sort of giving these lines in such a passionate, kind of hyperactive way. But it's quite interesting because in 2010, Professor Catherine Sutherland from Oxford University looked at 1,000 pages, over 1,000 pages of Jane Austen's original manuscripts. And what she discovered was that Austen used capital letters and underlining to emphasize words, just as we do today in formal writing, but she also used far more dashes than appeared in her novels. And the reason they disappeared is because William Gifford, who worked for the publisher, didn't like them, so edited them out. So examples like this that you can see on the screen are really good examples of when to use an M dash. But of course, there would be a lot more of them in Pride and Prejudice if it wasn't for that nasty editor. So if you are interested in grammar, please do follow Mrs. Spag on Twitter, Mrs._SPAG. She tweets every day something interesting about spelling, punctuation and grammar. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do so and pick up the grammar guide on which this series of videos is based. And yeah, see you next week.